Target just announced it is closing all its California stores. Not because shoppers stopped buying. Not because the company is failing. But because the state's rules made operating here too expensive to justify staying. This is happening right now, and it affects far more than one retailer. I'm Brooklyn. On this channel, we follow money, timelines, and consequences. We do not chase headlines. We trace the chain reaction mainstream coverage ignores. If you want the full picture, subscribe. This is not about politics. This is about math, incentives, and reality. A policy meant to protect workers and the environment has pushed one of the largest retail chains out of the state. The unintended outcome is not just empty parking lots. It is a shifting economic map, and the scale is statewide. I will break it down step by step. 2015, California passed a sweeping labor and compliance package. The intended goal was to improve worker protections and enforce safety standards. What actually happened was a new layer of cost and reporting for large employers. Retailers absorbed some, but the system rewarded those who could pass costs to consumers. Smaller stores struggled first, then mid-sized chains. By 2020, the burden became a factor in location decisions, not just budgeting. That shift went largely unnoticed outside business circles. Now the state's largest retailer is leaving. The question is not why Target left. The question is why California allowed the incentives to flip. 2018, California tightened energy and emissions rules for commercial buildings. The intended goal was to reduce statewide emissions and meet climate targets. What actually happened was a wave of retrofits, higher utility bills, and stricter compliance checks. For a retailer with hundreds of stores, that meant a massive, ongoing cost. 2020, the state expanded minimum wage and paid leave requirements. The intended goal was to raise living standards. What actually happened was a widening wage gap between states and a new incentive for automation and consolidation. Some retailers started shifting hours, shrinking staff, or centralizing operations. They did not announce it as a strategy. They called it efficiency. 2022, California introduced new regulations for logistics and trucking. The intended goal was to reduce pollution and improve road safety. What actually happened was higher transportation costs and a migration of distribution hubs out of the state. The supply chain became less resilient. Companies began calculating the value of staying in California against the cost of moving. 2024, insurers raised premiums across the state, citing wildfire and disaster risk. The intended goal was risk management. What actually happened was a new operating cost for all large commercial tenants. Insurance became a major factor in lease negotiations. Some landlords absorbed it. Most passed it to tenants. Target's math began to look different. The state's policies were no longer a series of separate rules. They formed a single system that reshaped business decisions. Now, let's explain how retail really works. Stores are not just sales points. They are networks of inventory, labor, logistics, and local demand. Profit margins in retail are thin. If you think of a store as a machine, the engine is volume and the oil is cost control. When costs rise, the machine still runs, but it runs slower. Translation: when rent, wages, compliance, and energy rise at once, a store stops being a growth asset. It becomes a liability. Large retailers can absorb shocks for a while. Small retailers cannot. The first to collapse are the ones who cannot negotiate better lease terms. The second are those who cannot automate. The third are those who cannot shift supply chains. In retail, the real cost is not the price tag. It is the hidden expense of compliance and logistics. Who pays? The consumer pays some. The worker pays some. The shareholder pays some. But the most sensitive line item is the one that cannot be adjusted quickly, the fixed cost. That is rent, insurance, and long-term staffing. When fixed costs rise, companies cut where they can and leave where they must. Target's exit is not a single decision. It is the result of multiple systems converging. The state's policies did not directly order Target to leave. They changed the incentives. Target responded to incentives. That is the logic mainstream media is missing. Domino 1, the local economy. When Target closes, hundreds of jobs vanish. Not all at once. They disappear in phases. Hours cut first, then positions, then entire stores. The group affected first is the retail workforce, mostly entry-level and part-time. They are not the ones who set policy. They are the ones who feel it first. Domino 2, suppliers and local vendors. Target relies on local contractors for maintenance, cleaning, security, and logistics. Those businesses lose contracts. Their revenue drops. They may survive, but they must cut staff or increase prices. That means the impact spreads to a second group, small business owners who are not protected by the same economies of scale. Domino 3, real estate and municipal revenue. A vacant big box store changes a neighborhood. Parking lots become empty. Tax revenue drops. Cities rely on sales tax, and large retailers contribute more than most small businesses. The local government now has a new budget gap. They must either raise taxes, cut services, or seek new tenants. The effect expands from the store to the city. It becomes a civic problem. That is how a policy aimed at workers can reshape municipal budgets. Domino 4, competitors. Some retailers may benefit, but only if they can absorb the same costs. Others will leave too. This creates a new retail landscape. The state becomes less attractive for large chains. The consequences move beyond California's borders because supply chains and distribution networks shift. Now the human story, after the system is clear. Meet Jessica, a store manager in Sacramento. She has been with Target for 8 years. Her performance reviews are strong. Her store is profitable. But the decision is not about her store. It is about the system. Jessica received the notice 2 weeks before the public announcement. She was told the closure was due to strategic restructuring. She knew what it meant. She also knew the state's rising costs had been discussed in meetings for years. She is not a victim of one company. She is a witness to a shifting economic model. Then there is Marco, a local contractor in Fresno. He provided maintenance services for 5 Target locations. His business has 12 employees. His contracts accounted for nearly 40% of his monthly revenue. He did not receive a new contract. He did not get a warning. He got a blank space where a steady income used to be. Both individuals are not part of the policy debate. They are part of the outcome. Their stories show what happens when incentives shift, and no one plans for the ripple effects. This is how policy becomes real. Now the irony. The state's stated goal was to protect workers and communities. But the system created incentives that push large employers out. The workers are the first to feel it. The communities are the second. California wanted to raise wages. The result is a cost structure that makes it harder to hire and retain workers. California wanted safer buildings and cleaner energy. The result is higher operating costs that reduce the number of stores that can afford to stay. California wanted better regulation. The result is fewer companies willing to expand. The policy succeeded in its stated goal, but failed in its unspoken consequence. The contradiction is quiet. It is not a scandal. It is a mathematical outcome. The system did what systems do. It responded to incentives. When incentives change, behavior changes. When behavior changes, outcomes change. That is the simplest explanation, and it is also the most overlooked. The policy was not wrong in intention. The system was incomplete in design. When you change the rules, you change the game. Target did not leave because it wanted to. It left because the game became unprofitable. Now the broader warning. This is not isolated to Target. This model is being repeated across multiple industries. The same incentives are pushing manufacturing, logistics, and even tech firms to relocate. The state is watching. Corporations are watching. Other states are watching. They see what happens when a large market becomes expensive to operate in. They see that policy can create a migration. That migration can change national supply chains. It can shift political power. It can change which states attract new investment. The precedent is clear. If the state continues to add cost layers without adjusting incentives, the next exit will not be a retailer. It will be an industry. The question is not whether it will happen. The question is when. This is not a call for panic. It is a call for clarity. The system is the villain, not the people. But systems are designed by people. That means the system can be redesigned. If the state wants the outcome it claims to want, it must align incentives with goals. Otherwise, the chain reaction will continue. And the next domino may be larger. Let's recap the chain. The state introduced a series of policies meant to protect workers and the environment. Those policies raised operating costs across wages, energy, compliance, and logistics. Large retailers absorbed costs for years, but the accumulation became a strategic factor. Target calculated the cost of staying versus leaving. It decided leaving was the rational choice. Jobs vanished. Local contractors lost revenue. Cities lost tax income. The retail landscape shifted. The system achieved its goals, but created an unintended outcome. Now the real question is accountability. Who is responsible for the gap between intention and outcome? Was it a failure of foresight? Was it a failure to model the long-term effects? Or was it simply the predictable result of a system that was never designed to be self-sustaining? In any case, the outcome is clear. The state's policies changed the incentives. Target responded. The chain reaction followed. And the mainstream narrative will likely focus on the announcement, not the system that caused it. Now we need to examine the broader economic logic. Retailers do not close stores because of temporary issues. They close stores because they anticipate a long-term trend. When a company moves, it does not do so impulsively. It does so after a long period of data and analysis. Target's decision is a signal. It tells other companies that California is a riskier market. Not because the state is unsafe, but because the cost structure is unstable. Unstable costs make planning impossible. When planning is impossible, investment stops. When investment stops, growth slows. When growth slows, jobs slow. This is how a policy designed to improve conditions can unintentionally slow the economy. The system rewards compliance, but not sustainability. It rewards short-term solutions, not long-term stability. That is why the chain reaction is not just about one company. It is about the logic of the system. If the state wants to keep large employers, it must make the cost of compliance predictable. It must align regulations with business realities. It must consider not only what is right, but what is sustainable. Because sustainability is the only way to keep the benefits in place. Now, the accountability question. If policy goals are noble, why were the long-term consequences ignored? The answer is in the incentives. The incentives reward short-term political wins. They do not reward long-term economic stability. That is the system. What happens next is not a mystery. Other retailers will watch. Other industries will watch. They will adjust their plans accordingly. The state will either adjust the system or accept the outcome. Either way, the consequences are still unfolding. So here is the final question for you, the viewer. If the system is pushing companies out, what should the state do to align incentives with outcomes? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you want more investigations like this, subscribe. Because the story is not over. It is only beginning. And the next domino may already be in motion.